Good morning, everyone. First of all, let me thank the week and the Manorama Group for inviting me to take part in this a very interesting and important function. I thought I'd follow up on Mr. Chidambaram's very interesting presentation comparing three different states and comparing the Tamil Nadu model with the other models, as it were. But I want to kind of speak about a related but a very distinct issue, which is federalism. What are the deeper challenges of federalism? So my talk is going to be in kind of two parts. One is I'm going to outline why there's a problem in federalism these days, focusing mostly on the economic and fiscal side. And then how should governments like Tamil Nadu respond to that, to this crisis or, kind of the challenges of federalism. And, this is some of it or a lot of it is based on the book that I've recently written with Devesh Kapoor called A Sixth of Humanity. And I'm going to be drawing upon that. So if you go back to the beginning of India's independence, 1947, there's probably the best book written on the drafting of the Indian Constitution, which is, of course, an absolutely spectacular document, not just for its content, but the kind of minds that went into it, the deliberative nature of the process, the people involved. And there, the chapter on federalism, this is a book by Granville Austin, it talks about the amicable union. I mean, that's the sense in which Indian federalism was conceived. Amicable, good relations between all parts of the union, between the center and the states, and across the states themselves. So that was, 1950, 51. But of course, a few years ago, we had this thunderous criticism by one of the southern politicians, basically saying that everything is going wrong on the fiscal federalism side and almost threatening secession, as it were. So from the amicable union to, to threats of secession, I mean, it seems like India has come along and somewhat unfortunate, has traversed an unfortunate trajectory, as it were. Now, I don't want to exaggerate, the problems today about fiscal challenges of federalism. We've always had problems. I mean, you have to go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s. We've always had problems in federalism, but somehow in this moment, it seems particularly stark. And it seems that federalism is under increasing strain. And I want to argue today that there are two deeper causes for these challenges of federalism. One, I think it's something that Mr. Chidambaram touched upon. I think there is no doubt that there's increasing political centralization. That whole democratic sensibility of bringing people together has been somewhat lost. And that's why we've seen an erosion of trust between different parts of the union. So the amicable union is under danger of becoming a non-trusting union, as it were. And I think that's one part I'll come to. But I think what people don't realize is that there is a deeper reason for this. And that is very simple and not that easy to fix, is that fundamentally in the last 30 years, there's been very rapid growth and very asymmetric growth. So in some ways, the asymmetric economic performance, which Mr. Chidambaram touched upon, and I'm going to talk about that, and it's not just on the economic side, it's also on the fiscal side, on fertility, on demographics. It's this fundamental divergence in performance that I think is giving rise to many of the challenges today. So let me just explain what I mean. I'm going to start backwards and try and persuade you that it's this combination of rapid growth and asymmetric growth across the states that's leading to many of the problems. One example of this is, when India started growing very rapidly, in the 90s, especially in the 2000s, suddenly when we started growing, tax resources started becoming more abundantly available. And that's the point at which the jockeying for resources happened. In the old days when India was not growing very rapidly, there was not that much of a jockeying for resources because there were not that many resources in the first place. It was almost like, having to allocate scarce resources. But one example of this is this jockeying of resources between the center and the states, manifested in what this chart shows are centrally sponsored schemes, how they increased in size. After 2000, you can see that centrally sponsored schemes increased rapidly. So this is an example of the center trying to jockey and take away more resources. And by the way, this is not peculiar to any one party. It actually began under UPA and it's continued under it. So it's completely bipartisan. It's not about, Congress good, Congress bad, BJP good, BJP bad. Once resources became available, they began a jockeying for resources, and that's why. And this is also reflected in the use of cesses, by the way. Cesses are a way for the center to take away resources, sleight of hand, take it away kind of in ways that are legal but violate the spirit of fiscal federalism. And those cesses also, again, although they've been used a lot by this government, they began under the previous government. So growth is what led to this jockeying for resources and the beginning of strains in fiscal federalism. It's a very complicated chart. This chart shows how divergent has been economic growth across the states. So in 1960, per capita GDP of most of the states are close together. By 1980, they start diverging, and especially after 1980, in the mid-1980s, you see suddenly growth diverges between states on top who do well and states on the bottom who've not done as well. So this explosion in divergence is a fact of what happened, especially after 1980. So this divergence in economic performance, by the way, this divergence speaks to one good aspect of federalism in India, essentially after the 1980s, when policy centralization, political centralization, and fiscal centralization started slowly getting, checked. Rather, once states started acquiring more control over resources, over politics. So when they got agency, the good states did well, and the other states which didn't perform as well, didn't act as well, started performing badly. So in some ways, this is a good aspect of Indian federalism, where there is still enough agency for the states to do well, regardless of what the center does or does not do. So in some ways, this illustrates Mr. Chidambaram's point that it's not so much double, triple, single engine, is what the states do once they acquire agency that determines what the outcomes are going to be. So this was in some ways, it's not, one would have to be cautious about calling this desirable, but in some sense, this is what happens when states acquire more agency. And this is one of our most striking findings from the book. The divergence between the states was such that if you start the clock in 1980, the southern states, including Tamil Nadu, grew almost as fast as China and for as long. And the other states were growing like, a bit like Sub-Saharan Africa or like, Latin America, whereas the southern states, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Haryana, were growing like China. So once you see this, you say, wow, the question is not why India can't grow like China. The question becomes, why can't the Hindi heartland states grow as rapidly as other states in India like Tamil Nadu? So this is a fundamental aspect of India which we need to internalize, not just to understand why some states did well in others, but the consequences of that for federalism. Again, a very complicated chart. All this you have to take away from this chart is, once these resources started growing, once there was asymmetric performance, the transfers from the richer states to the poorer states started rising consistently. And essentially, the top ones are the Hindi heartland and the East getting more and more resources. And the bottom chart shows that the southern and the western states were transferring resources to the Hindi heartland. And again, this was made possible, these rising transfers, because of rapid growth and asymmetric growth. One feature of that, what happened was that states' fiscal performance, how much they could spend on their people, measured as expenditure per capita, you'll find that, for example, the southern states spent something like 35,000 rupees per capita in their expenditure, which is like 4 or 5 times that in the Hindi heartland. Why did this become possible? Again, because the performance was very different and striking. The richer states had more resources. So double engine, triple engine, doesn't matter. If you grow, you generate the resources, and then you can spend more on your own, on your people, as it were. So why is asymmetric performance a problem? Now, I didn't read out the full quote to you from D.K. Shiv Kumar's brother, but this is something that's been expressed by Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, essentially that, please rectify this because we are transferring more and more resources. So our resources that we generate are being taken away and being given to some of the poorer states. So it's becoming politically unsustainable. It's also becoming unsustainable because of the perverse incentives it creates. Because the richer states are saying, we do well, and yet we are penalized for doing well because more of our resources have to be transferred. And the poorer states, despite underperformance, they seem to be getting more and more resources. So again, it's the combination of asymmetric performance and the perverse incentives that creates makes it politically unsustainable. And of course, the elephant in the room is that this is a problem in the context of delimitation. The truth is, political representation has been frozen at 1971 levels. And if you were a real Democrat, a true Democrat, you would have to agree that this is not right. It is not one person, one vote in India because we've frozen. I mean, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, but it's not, consistent with true democratic principles. And what this chart shows is that if it were to become truly democratic, the southern states would lose out, like Tamil Nadu. So the fear or the anxiety is that this asymmetric performance means more and more transfers are being made by southern states to the poorer states in the Hindi heartland. If that continues, and along with that they lose representation, then it will be a double whammy for the states. And that's the heart of the concern that's being expressed in states like Tamil Nadu. Now, I don't want to, so I said 2 reasons for problems of fiscal federalism. One is the asymmetric rapid growth and asymmetric fiscal performance. And of course, asymmetric fertility performance. The truth is that southern states have achieved low fertility, and therefore that's why the political representation problem is becoming more and more acute. That's why a few months ago, Mr. Stalin said, a bit like what China is doing, that, we should have more babies in Tamil Nadu, for example. So that whole demographic thing is looming large in everyone's minds. Now, that is combined, however, with, I think, what is happening is the erosion of democratic sensibility. I mean, there is no doubt that there's been much more political centralization, that the problem is not so much or less that, things are done in certain, but the point is that they are not done in the same inclusive spirit, consultation, inclusion, than in the past. And whether it happens on the language or the culture side, whether it happens because investments are diverted to favored states, the increasing recourse to cesses. In fact, if you look at the latest, what's happening on the GST, more and more truly, combined resources are being appropriated by the center. And we saw what happened with Manrega. And so a series of actions have led to this erosion of trust between the center and the states, and between some of the, across the states as well. And this is a bit of a problem. One of the casualties of that, you will see, is that the GST now is delivering less revenues than the pre-GST regime. So in fact, if you plot this, the GST as a share of GDP is now going to be almost 1 percentage point of GDP less than when it began. This is also now a casualty of the challenges of fiscal federalism. So what should states like Tamil Nadu do? So one thing, of course, and I want to give you a success story. Of course, all the states that feel that they have a grievance, they should get together and kind of lobby for their common interests. And in fact, it did happen in the context of the 16th Finance Commission. I'm saying this because I advised 5 governments on this. The chart that I showed about how the transfers are rising and rising from the southern states to the Hindi heartland, what these states, given the advice that I gave them, what they argued very strongly to the 16th Finance Commission was to say that more of the resources should come back to us because we're contributing more to the resources. So the inclusion of GDP as a criterion in the 16th Finance Commission is very much a tribute to the success of the southern states, to say that, the reason GDP is important is that is your contribution to the tax base. So if you have more GDP, you contribute more tax to tax base, and therefore you should get back. So I think the 16th Finance Commission deserves credit for at least recognizing that the open-ended rising transfers cannot continue, and it has to be checked, and this was one example of that. So that's one thing, and of course, this has to extend to other aspects like language, culture, the imposition of Hindi, whatever, but I'm not an expert on that. I don't want to get into this. What I want to say is that, so when President Trump imposes costs on India via all these tariffs, et cetera, the response of most of us is, look, try and change Mr. Trump's policies, but the truth is you may not have very much success. So a lot of the onus has to turn back to India to how to counter these Trump tariffs. Similarly, I think in the case of the southern states, remember what is happening, some of the things are beyond the control of states, so they should really focus on improving their own performance, their own resilience in the wake of all these challenges that I've been thinking. So I think in the case of Tamil Nadu, I think Tamil Nadu has made a lot of progress. I think it's one of the really model states, but it has at least 3 areas where I think things have to improve in the future. Otherwise, the Tamil Nadu model will run up against setbacks going forward. I think the power sector in Tamil Nadu is a big albatross around the neck. The DISCOM, state DISCOM finances are very poor, and this sector is holding back and can hold back Tamil Nadu. I think I just want to remind you that if you look at the global economy, the reason that China's economic future looks very promising is because China has become the world's most advanced electro-state based on renewables. So, and if India and Tamil Nadu have to move forward in that, I think the power sector has to be improved. I think alcohol policies are a problem here for a number of reasons. I think that needs to be improved. And a final point I would say is that whenever states complain about the center, which may be valid, they do to the third tier what they claim the center does to it. So states are themselves perpetrators. While they may be victims of central government policies, they are also perpetrators when it comes to the third tier. So I think, Devesh and I have this chart which shows that India's third tier, unlike China and the United States, is very weak, especially urban and local bodies. And you can see the own resources generated by urban local bodies is a pittance, very small. The 16th Finance Commission has been trying to address that, but I think especially because urbanization is India's future, especially because we don't just need competition between the states, but also competition between cities in India, I think it's really imperative for Tamil Nadu also to empower the third tier, especially the urban local bodies, in order to get ahead. So, concluding thoughts, India needs cooperative and competitive federalism, but as I said, not just in the center-states relationship, but also in the relationship between the states and the third tier. A new report was released by Tamil Nadu, a report on rethinking federalism. I think one thing we should forget about is we don't need new institutional structures. We have enough institutional structures for federalism. It's the practice of federalism that needs to be improved, especially on the part of the central government. It has to become more. But I think in the long run, if performance across India continues to diverge, no matter what you do, the problems of fiscal federalism will remain, because there will be, if poor states continue to be poor, rich states continue to be rich, the transfers will keep mounting, it'll become more and more politically unsustainable. So in some ways, if you think about it, it is in the interest of the richer states like Tamil Nadu that the Hindi heartland states start improving their performance, their governance, and so on. Because it's not just good for India, which it will be, but it will also go a long way towards addressing the problems of fiscal federalism. Because ultimately, if different parts of a federal union perform very differently, there will be unsustainable and uncontrollable tensions, which will manifest themselves in different ways, but that will be the underlying cause. So it is in the interest of all the rich and southern states like Tamil Nadu for the Hindi heartland to start doing better. And I think, my own vision for the future is the FDI that Tamil Nadu is attracting very successfully, more and more should start going to the Hindi heartland, because that's how performance will be equalized across India. If we have one Foxconn factory in India, we need 10 Foxconn factories in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar and Rajasthan. That's how I think ultimately not just India will do better, but the Indian Union will be more cohesive as a result. Thank you very much.